Hey guys, Languagehacker here. Core set announcement came out, which is very, very big because it sets the tone for the full year in terms of cards that classes will have access to. These are cards that everyone will be getting for free, which is again very important because the building blocks that they need to build decks for the upcoming year. So I'm going to be talking about some of the cards coming out, coming in, and how I feel in general about the changes that Blizzard is making here. So let's go through and talk about this. Demon Hunter's losing a couple of cards that didn't really see play. Seems fine. And they're getting some very powerful cards here. Immolation Aura was one of the strongest cards in Demon Hunter's removal arsenal last year when it's left standard. So bringing that back in is very good for any Demon Hunter decks that are not aggro, right? Anything that's either control or combo-y. Having Kayn in general, even if you don't run it, is very powerful because if the meta gets taunt heavy, you can include that as a tech card. And Studies is just very, very flexible. I'm honestly slightly concerned that Studies is back in for Demon Hunter, but that's fine. So very strong showing right off the bat here for Demon Hunter. Druid, Lunar Clip, strong. Solar Clip, strong. Kiri, kind of weak. But in the first set of the year, there's fewer cards you can actually play in decks because card pool is more limited, so that might be fine as well. Witchwood Apple used to be, I think, 2 mana. Kind of meh, but it might be fine as a curve play, but it's probably just meh. Earthen Scales is out, so some survivability gone, and then 3 cards that didn't see play. Losing Earthen Scales is kind of big, but I think gaining these is also quite strong, and I think there will be there will still be access to some armor gain in the class. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Honestly, the Quester deck existing right now doesn't even run that, so it's fine. These cards are very good. Strong for Druid. Hunter loses some cards that weren't really played. A couple of secrets come in. Doggy Biscuit in the core set I think is very good because it's just a flexible card. Oh, it's also worth noting that tradable is now an evergreen mechanic, which means that it'll pop up sporadically through mini sets or expansions going forward. It's one of the core Hearthstone mechanics now, which I think is good. It makes decks more consistent and it makes decks more fun to play because you do your stuff more often. But also Doggy Biscuit in general, in this case, is just a good card to have because it promotes aggressive decks in Hunter. Play 1-drop, slam a Doggy Biscuit on it. It's very good. Not sure about Dragonbane, if that's going to be played or not, but I think it did see some play back in the day, like Highlander Hunter. Flexible-ish package here. Mainly Doggy Biscuit I'm happy about. Secret support is okay. Mage loses some cards that weren't really played. This is interesting. Fire Sale was a card that I believe was going to rotate out, but is now in the core set. Fire Sale I think is pretty good. Promotes gameplay for like a control-y or slower style mage, which is fine. Artificer does that as well. Luna can be used pretty much anywhere, but generally where you want to be running cheaper stuff where you can cycle through your deck quickly. And a couple of burn cards. I should point out that core set shouldn't be making decks just by itself, but it should have flexibility. And I think some of the things that they've shown so far do have that. Like here you have some access to some control tools, some other flexible tools, so I think this is good. I'll be describing my thoughts on this from a flexibility standpoint, because I believe they said that's what their goal is going to be this year. Having flexibility in the core sets, which also is, I believe, is something they said they would change as needed. They will change it as needed throughout the year if they find that some cards and choices aren't performing well. Paladin, some dude stuff's coming back. Must for battle. We haven't seen that in years. Lithraxian, I think, was supposed to rotate, or is it already rotated? I don't think it's in the game now, so yeah, it must have been rotated. So we have some Dude Paladin stuff. Hammer of Wrath got a buff. It's 3 mana now, which is like okay. It's not a great card, but if you don't have 30 cards to put in a deck, it's fine. Hand of Vidal is very good. Paladin had a lot of 1 mana plays recently. 2 mana plays weren't quite as flexible, so Hand of Vidal is nice. And you can put this in any deck. It doesn't have to be an aggro deck, but it probably performs a bit better in an aggressive deck. Grime Street, I think, used to be a 1/1, but it's still a 2 mana card. More hand buff stuff. Flexible, I like it. Notably, they're taking out secrets, so there are no secrets in the Paladin pool this year, or at least in the first set. Rag wasn't really played, now there's Peacekeeper. Priest got a huge overhaul, and I'll talk about that as well, too, not just core set stuff. They have an overheal mechanic, which is also evergreen now. Overheal reads, when this gets healed past its full health. For example, if this was a 2 mana 1/3, and you hero power it, it would only heal for 1, but the overheal would trigger because you've healed it from 3 to 5, which would give it an extra 2 attack. In this case, and some other cases, would do some other stuff. I think that's generally good because one of the weaknesses of Priest is that if you don't have stuff in play, you don't have stuff to heal. And if your things are at full health, your hero power doesn't really do a lot. So I think this is a clever way of making Priest's hero power more thematic and like viable / playable. I like that they did that. Katrina's coming in. I think she used to be 8 mana. She's now 7 mana. Notably, I think this is one of the most important changes they've made in a very long time. Benedictus, being in the core set, means that Priest now has access to flexibility just through the existence of this card. You can now have a slightly more aggressive archetype just by entering Shadow form at the start of the game. And it's not a super complicated restriction. So I think this by itself being in the game adds a very good layer of flexibility. I like Shard of the Nara as well. It looks like they are trying to include, in most cases, some sort of tradable. So that classes have access to that. But also Shard of the Nara in general is decent because it's very, like, 1 mana silence on a tradable stick is very nice. Everything else is okay. I don't care too much about this stuff. There's probably going to be some sort of tempo deck where you just play stuff on curve, and then you can heal for benefit if you don't have the mana, or like the mana to spend on other minions. A lot of stuff being lost here, but most of these weren't really played. Cleric's a big one in terms of combo decks, and Radiant Elemental is big in terms of Svalna, which is my favorite deck right now. So that's unfortunate that that's going out, but that's fine. We don't need Radiant Elemental perpetually. It's probably fine. This is pushing more of a tempo archetype. Fine. Rogue. Rogue Secrets come back in. They were in for a hot minute, what, last year or the year before that? They weren't super crazy, so I don't really think it's that big of a deal. There's a few secrets already existing right now in Rogue as well. And there are cards that synergize with them. So Secret Rogue will probably be a thing. But the secret cards themselves aren't super powerful. They don't end games. So there will need to be some sort of finish for that. But flexibility here if you want that. Minstrel can be put in like any deck that wants to draw cards. And this used to be a 3/2. I personally hate Hanar, and I find it very frustrating to play against. Some people enjoy that. And again, notably, Paladin secrets are not in. So that does reduce the amount of mana you can really spend with Hanar on relevant things. And by that I mean, you can't just pick 2 and 3 mana cards because it's very, very slow. One of the benefits of Hanar was that you would always get a Paladin card, a Mage card, and a Hunter card. And now, with Paladins not having secrets, you can't spend that 1 mana as a bridge, like, oh, these cards suck, let me just take a Paladin secret and get something else. So it is a little bit weaker than it used to be, but I still personally just like this. Eviscerate's back in. I don't think we needed this. I believe Wicked Stab is rotating, so they're losing some source of damage. And Eviscerate's honestly not that bad. And it's combo, which if you've seen some of the new cards coming out, combo was a theme there. So I don't hate that. I don't think Eviscerate's that bad. I just dislike Rogue, as you can probably tell. Fan of Knives, down to 2 mana. I think that's okay. I mean, this is virtually unplayable at 3 mana. At 2 mana, it cycles a card, it deals damage. With some spell damage, you could do some cute stuff. Maybe there's some sort of deck where you cycle and do a bunch of damage. I haven't seen all the new cards yet, but generally this is fine. I just really dislike Hanar. Shaman has some interesting stuff. There was a bit of an overload theme with some of the new cards coming out, so I like Ancestral Knowledge, Zap, and Overdraft for that. And there's also some totem synergy. So Eyesore, Thing from Below, and I think one of the new totems they showed gives Shaman a bit of flexibility. So I like that. Good. Warlock is getting Defile. Big fan of Defile. Very, very strong card. That by itself is just good enough. There's some big demony stuff you can do with Voidcaller, which gives you some flexibility with your deck building. That's fine. Spirit Bomb is okay as well. Not super exciting, but Defile being back is honestly just a big one. Warrior's getting some old stuff that we... Oh, I should talk about stuff... Sorry, I forgot about these cards leaving. These cards are basically not very played. That's fine. Also not really played, so that's fine. Yeah, also not played. Good, we've caught up now. Warrior. Armadillo got buffed a little bit. Bladestorm was an okay tool, but it's very easy for your opponent to play around it. Downomatic's just a solid card. Happy to see that. Sword Eater, solid card. Happy to see that. Excuse me. Heavy Plate, tradable. Some armor gain. I think that's okay. Flunky's kind of meh. Woodcutter's Axe is kind of meh. This got buffed, I think. It used to say buff a random friendly rush minion. So it's a bit more flexible, but I don't know if you still want this. There's probably other things you want to be doing with your mana. If there's some like crazy game-ending taunt cards that we see, maybe Flunky's okay, but I'm inclined to think that that's not great. I don't think it's worth running just for like Sword Eater. Some stuff to work with here, but not a lot. All these cards weren't really played except for Deckhand and Pirate Warrior, which isn't really deck anymore, so that's fine. A lot of neutral stuff going on. We should talk about a lot of these. The Explorers are all out, notably Bran. The others weren't really played too much. Ooze is out, but Viper's coming in, so that's okay. A lot of these other cards just weren't played. Mistress is probably a notable one because it was used in some decks that required some defensive healing. The rest of this isn't too big of a loss. This was running a little bit in OTK Warrior and OTK Druid for a little bit. A lot of interesting stuff come back in, though. See. Rag, boom. So we have some game-ending stuff here, if we're relying on just tempo into stuff. Ziliak's notably coming back, which is very, very big. This was run in so many decks because of its, I guess, its power. It was just good. Black Knight changed to a 4/4/4. Fine. It's probably outdated as a 6-mana card. Dirty Rat's quite big. This gives decks a chance to interact with combo stuff, which I think is very good. I'm happy that this is in standard. Menace is a 4/3/2. I think it used to be a 4/3/1, and it has Magnetic. Magnetic's back as a mechanic, at least for this year, but it's not an evergreen mechanic. Eater of Secrets is fine, which is probably a nod to, you know, some of the other cards coming back this year. So I'm happy that this exists, but you probably don't run this just because people are running secrets. We'll see. I don't know how many slots we'll have for tech cards. Neophyte's back, which is nice. Tempo option with a little bit of disruption. Armor Vendor to replace Mistress going out, I guess. You can stack up the armor instead of getting healing. That might not heal you if you're already at 30. Warg, you got a bit of a buff. Apple Bomb's fine. Librarian as a tradable. Viper. Tour Guide's a big one I wanted to point out. This was used in a lot of different decks, and it was just good. I'm expecting this to pop up again in a few decks. Probably Warlock. Maybe some other stuff too. We'll see. Mermai's okay in some aggressive decks, but probably not crazy. Undead Synergy to consider. Glacial Shard probably not using that much. So not too many crazy cards here, but that's fine. We don't need every card to be in every deck, right? I think we have a good variety of stuff to bring back. So I'm actually, overall, very happy with what they have in the core set going out and coming in. I'm very, very happy with a lot of this stuff. I think this should add a lot of flexibility, and it'll allow us to build decks that aren't necessarily handed to us just from these core cards, but that we can use pretty safely in a variety of decks. So I'm very happy with this. Good job, Blizzard. Keep it up.